Imagine this. Many people spend their entire lives chasing the light, living by good vibes only, seeking positivity, spiritual highs, and endless distractions, all to avoid looking inward. They believe that if they just keep running toward the light, they'll eventually be free. But here's the truth. No one tells them. What you're running from doesn't disappear. It follows you until you're brave enough to turn around and face it. Carl Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Yet in a world that glorifies positivity, we've learned to reject half of who we are. We praise joy and bury sorrow. We showcase success while hiding our shame. We celebrate love yet quietly run from anger. And in doing so, we unconsciously tear ourselves in two. This isn't about glorifying darkness, nor is it an abstract psychological theory. It's a journey back to your whole self. Because the parts of you you fear the most, feel most ashamed of, and desperately want to reject, might be the very place where your deepest power lives. And so, I invite you to walk with me, not to run away, but to look straight into yourself, to step through fear, to touch the forgotten parts, and to understand why integrating your shadow isn't just a path to healing. It's the only key to becoming a complete human being. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you try to stay positive, the emptiness inside never goes away? Why you always have to pretend you're okay while you're falling apart inside? And why, even in your happiest moments, a small voice still whispers, "Something's missing." If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. In fact, it's not a psychological flaw or a weakness in you. It's a signal, a call from the part of you you've spent your whole life rejecting, your shadow. Jung called it the shadow, but don't mistake it for something evil. The shadow isn't a demon waiting to drag you down. It's every part of you that was once rejected, judged, or locked away, just so you could be accepted, loved, and seen as normal. It starts when we're young. When we get angry, adults say, "Don't be angry." When we cry, they say, "Stop it. Be strong." When we express ourselves, they frown. "Don't be so weird." And so, piece by piece, we start pushing those parts down into the basement of our psyche. Anger gets locked away. Fear gets hidden. Sensitivity gets buried. Even talent, passion, and primal instinct all stripped away from who we truly are and thrown into the dark. Then we grow up, wearing a socially approved mask called me a polite, agreeable version that causes no trouble. But deep inside, something begins to crack, because no one can live their whole life while rejecting themselves. Maybe you felt it, an explosion of anger out of nowhere that terrifies you. A burning jealousy when someone achieves what you crave. A deep dislike for someone who is just like you, except they have the courage to live authentically. That isn't weakness. That's your shadow speaking. It's not trying to destroy you. It just wants to be heard. But we do the opposite. We try to silence it by any means. We run to work, relationships, spirituality, addictions, parties, trips, anything to distract ourselves from the unease inside. We read self-help books, repeat positive affirmations, plaster fake smiles on our faces, and tell the world, "I'm fine." But in the silence, when there's no role to play, when night falls and the world goes quiet, we feel emptier than ever. Do you see it? Every time you try to stay high vibe, you're digging a deeper gap between yourself and the truth. Every time you judge a feeling as negative and try to suppress it, you abandon another part of yourself. And one day, you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the person staring back. Here's the tragedy. In trying to run from the darkness, we don't just abandon our pain, we abandon our power. The very anger you were taught to fear is the fire that can protect you from being exploited. The sensitivity you were shamed for is the gift that allows you to connect deeply with others. The recklessness you suppressed is the seed of creativity and freedom. And if you keep living as only half of yourself, you'll always feel incomplete. No amount of success, money, or love can fill that void, because that emptiness is shaped like you. Ask yourself, are you living as your whole self or just the most acceptable version of it? Are you craving love while refusing to love the darkness within you? Have you ever looked at someone living fully and wondered, why can't I be like that? The answer isn't in trying to be more positive, it's in stopping the rejection. Because the darkness you fear isn't your enemy, it's the part you left behind on the journey to adulthood. It's the door you never dared to open. A door that holds your pain, yes, but also all the power you once had. And maybe it's time to stop running. Time to turn around and look directly at what you've avoided for so many years. Because the truth is, the thing you're running from is the very thing you're searching for. Are you ready? Imagine if one day you were brave enough to open that door, to face the darkness and call it by its name. Wouldn't that be the day you finally found yourself? The journey isn't easy, but it's the only path that leads back to wholeness. And that's where the true journey of shadow integration begins. Have you noticed? Every time life becomes too heavy, your mind immediately tries to escape. When loneliness creeps into your heart, you bury yourself in work. When pain from the past resurfaces, you turn on the TV or scroll for hours to forget. When emptiness rises in your chest, you reach for a party, a drink, or a new relationship to fill the void. And so, day after day, your life becomes a series of endless escapes. But where are you running? From whom? Not from the outside world. You're running from yourself, from the parts you don't want to see, from the memories you locked away, from the cries of your soul you've long ignored. Jung once said, "What we do not make conscious in the unconscious will appear in our lives as fate." And it's terrifying to realize the very things you refuse to face are repeating in your life like a loop. The same kinds of people you attract, the same mistakes you keep making, the same emotions you thought you'd overcome coming back stronger than ever. We call it a bad habit, lack of discipline, or not being strong enough. But the truth runs deeper. It's unacknowledged pain. And pain, when ignored, will always find a way back. At first, it knocks gently as anxiety. Then it pounds as stress, as anger. Finally, it breaks down the door as addiction, self-destruction, or depression. Not to punish you, but to force you to stop and look it in the eye. Be honest. How many times have you promised, "I'll never do that again," only to repeat the same thing? How many times have you fallen into the same toxic relationship, the same painful cycle, even though you knew exactly how it would end? How many nights have you woken up with an invisible emptiness you couldn't escape? That's not weakness. That's survival. When pain becomes too much, the human brain will do anything to avoid it. Some turn to substances, some to work, some to spirituality as a form of escape. But behind every behavior lies one single motive, not to find happiness, but to avoid feeling pain. We call it pleasure-seeking, but most of the time it's pain-avoiding. Every click on an entertaining video, every glass of wine you pour, every time you say, "I'm fine," while falling apart. They're all desperate attempts to avoid touching what's screaming inside. But here's the paradox. The more you run, the more you're chased. Because what you reject doesn't disappear, it simply changes form. The fear of abandonment turns into jealousy and control. Repressed anger becomes depression or violence. Buried shame transforms into self-destruction or addiction. And so, you live your life like a pendulum. On one side, the high moments, when you find a temporary escape, euphoria, excitement, pleasure. On the other, the crash, when it's all over and the pain returns deeper than before, again and again, forever. The tragedy is that many people live their entire lives swinging on that pendulum, thinking they're living, when in fact they're just running. And no one tells them. The only way out isn't to run faster, it's to stop. Stop to listen. Stop to feel. Stop to look directly into the darkness you've feared for so long. When you can sit with your pain without trying to fix it, erase it, or slap a positive label on it, something miraculous happens. The darkness loses its power. It's no longer a monster lurking in the night. It becomes a part of you, a part that was once wounded, once abandoned, but is now heard and embraced. Have you ever wondered why those who've endured deep heartbreak often become stronger, deeper, and more authentic? It's not because they overcame the darkness, but because they learned how to walk with it. Remember this: the goal of this journey isn't to eliminate darkness. No one can erase pain, fear, or the past. The goal is to learn how to live with them without letting them control you. When you stop running, pain ceases to be your enemy. It becomes your guide. It leads you back to yourself. And it's right there, in the stillness of not running anymore, that true freedom begins. Not the freedom of always happy, but the freedom of wholeness, the ability to laugh and cry, to love and hurt, to live with both light and darkness without fear. So the question is no longer, how do I escape the darkness? The real question is, do you have the courage to stop and look at it? Because only when you stop does the darkness lose its power, and when the darkness loses its power, the light you've been searching for all along finally begins to shine from within you. Imagine you've been carrying a backpack since childhood. Every time you were scolded for crying, you stuffed an unshed tear inside. Every time you were called selfish for having needs, you put in an unmet desire. Every time someone said, "Stop dreaming," when you shared your hopes, you tucked away a rejected piece of your soul. And over the years, that backpack grew, heavy, silent, and always on your back, even if you didn't notice. You go on living. You learn to smile. You work hard. You seek love, success, money. But no matter how much you achieve, you still feel a weight pulling you down, not because you're weak, but because that backpack has never been opened. That's the nature of the shadow. It's not something outside you. It's everything you've left behind. And it doesn't disappear. It's still there, just wearing a different face. Exhaustion, anxiety, sudden anger, or that nagging sense that something's missing you can't name. Have you ever wondered why you overreact to things that seem small? Why even a light criticism makes you want to disappear? Why you can't stand it when someone shows power or freedom, qualities you once had but buried long ago? The shadow doesn't show up to ruin your life. It shows up to remind you of the parts you've forgotten. Every time you explode in anger, it might be the inner child screaming, "See me." Every time you feel jealous, it might be buried talent longing to come alive. Every time you deeply dislike someone, it might be because they're freely living the part of you that you lost. But instead of listening, we keep suppressing. We label ourselves. I'm bad. I'm weak. I shouldn't feel this way. And in that very moment of denial, the shadow grows stronger because what is rejected controls us from the unconscious. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That quote isn't a warning. It's an invitation. Because when you're brave enough to open that backpack, you'll discover something profound. Alongside the wounds lies a buried treasure. Yes, in the darkness, there isn't just pain. It also holds power. It might be the resilience you lost when you were told to be good as a child. It could be the creativity that was once extinguished when someone mocked your dreams. It could be the instinct to protect yourself that you buried in order to be loved. When you begin to unpack each memory, examine each emotion, and listen to each silenced voice, the darkness stops being as terrifying as you once thought. It's no longer a monster screaming in the night. It becomes a teacher, a guide, a keeper of the keys leading you back to wholeness. Ask yourself, can you truly live fully if you carry that backpack your entire life without ever opening it? Can you truly be free if you're always afraid when the darkness knocks on your door? Or will you dare, just once, to sit down, open it up, and face everything inside? No matter how painful, ugly, or chaotic it might be. The miracle is this: when you're brave enough to do that, the darkness begins to change. It's no longer something to overcome. It becomes a part of you, merging with the light, forming a unified whole. And when that happens, you're no longer controlled by emotions. You no longer fear vulnerability. You no longer run from the uncomfortable parts of yourself. You begin to live with all of who you are. You can feel pain without falling apart. You can be angry without hurting anyone. You can feel sadness without losing hope. Because you're no longer a victim of the darkness. You're its companion. And when you choose to walk with your darkness, something extraordinary happens. The light you've been seeking all along is no longer far away. It's not hidden in good vibes only, false positivity, or fleeting moments of excitement. It's right at the center of what you feared the most. Maybe you've never considered this. Darkness isn't what stops you from living a full life. It's your rejection of the darkness that has kept you from truly living. So, if life is a journey, the destination is not absolute light, but the place where light and darkness become one. And to get there, you must be courageous enough to open that backpack, look inside, and say to yourself, all of these parts are me. And that is the moment you begin to come home. There's a truth most of us don't want to admit. When we lock away our darkness, we don't just bury our pain. We bury our vital power. And that's why, even if you seem fine on the surface, deep inside there's always a sense of incompleteness, a void nothing can fill. Look back at your life. How many times have you swallowed your anger so you wouldn't be called difficult? How many times have you stayed silent when you needed to speak because you were afraid of being called too sensitive? How many times have you abandoned a bold idea because someone once laughed at your dream? Every time you didn't just suppress an emotion, you cut off a part of yourself, and over time, what's left is a smaller, more acceptable, safe version of you, but one that no longer shines as brightly as you were born to. Do you feel it? That sense that something inside is knocking, demanding to live. A forgotten talent, a silenced voice, a burst of creativity that was extinguished long ago. Those are the fragments of power you left behind in the dark. And here's the irony. Those buried fragments are the very keys to the meaning and purpose you've been searching for. So many people spend their lives chasing passion, purpose, or a reason to get out of bed, without realizing it was never gone. It's just been locked away in the basement of the unconscious, along with every part they've rejected. Maybe you were told you were too dreamy, and now you're so practical, you've lost the ability to believe in the extraordinary. Maybe you were judged as selfish, and now you're afraid to set boundaries, exhausted from living for everyone else. Maybe you were called too sensitive, and now you wear a mask of numbness, losing the deep connection your soul craves. The very things that were once criticized are your greatest strengths, but wrapped in shame and fear, you no longer recognize their value. And so, you live as though searching for something outside, a new job, a new relationship, a new achievement, to feel enough. But the only thing that can fill that void are the parts of you you've left behind. Have you ever wondered why, even after achieving everything you dreamed of, a stable career, someone who loves you, a beautiful home, you still feel incomplete. Because enough isn't an external destination. Enough is when you stop living as half of yourself. Shadow integration is the journey of reclaiming what's yours. It's the moment you dare to say no when you need to, without guilt. It's the moment you allow yourself to cry. Not because you're weak, but because your heart is alive. It's the moment you speak your truth, not to please others, but to honor yourself. And then, something miraculous happens. Life stops being a performance. You no longer wear masks to be loved. You no longer fake positivity to feel worthy. You no longer try to prove you're good to have value. Because now, you're no longer split in two, you are whole. In that state, joy is no longer fragile. Pain is no longer terrifying. Every emotion becomes part of the living symphony called being human. You stop chasing temporary highs to fill the void. Instead, you feel every moment, both beautiful and painful, with an open heart. And perhaps most importantly, when you reclaim the parts you've lost, you don't just change how you see yourself. You change how the world reflects back to you. Relationships become deeper because you show up as your authentic self. Work becomes more meaningful because you're no longer proving your worth. You're creating value from who you truly are. Life becomes more complete, not because it's perfect, but because you've learned to embrace even the imperfect pieces as essential parts of the whole. So, ask yourself one simple question. Who would I become if I stopped rejecting myself? You might not know the answer right now. But one thing is certain. The person you're searching for isn't ahead of you. They're waiting where you left them long ago. And maybe living a full life isn't about adding anything new. It's about reclaiming what's always been yours. Those parts buried in the darkness. They're not burdens, they're treasures. And when you begin to bring them back into the light, you'll realize you were never incomplete. You just forgot who you are. The journey back to yourself doesn't end with simply recognizing the shadow or understanding that it holds power. Awareness is just the first step. It's like standing before a door and knowing a treasure lies beyond. But to touch it, you must open the door and walk through. That's the essence of integration. Not a sudden, magical transformation, but a daily practice, repeated moment by moment. Integration begins with something deceptively simple, pausing to notice. The shadow doesn't appear holding a sign that says, "I'm here." It often shows up in the moments when your reactions are strongest, when a passing comment makes you angrier than it should, when someone's success makes you so jealous you want to withdraw, when you feel ashamed just for setting a boundary. These reactions aren't problems to fix. They're signals, and each signal is a doorway to a forgotten part of yourself. Instead of running from emotions, pause and ask, why does this bother me so much? What part of me is being touched here? What part of me is trying to speak through this feeling? By shifting your perspective from "this is a bad feeling" to "this is a message," you begin the healing process. Because once an emotion is heard, it no longer needs to scream. The next step is creating space for the shadow to speak. You can't have an inner dialogue if your mind is always crowded with external noise. Make time for silence, journal, meditate, walk alone in nature, or simply sit with yourself. No phone, no work. In that quiet, the buried things begin to rise. Maybe it's a forgotten memory. Maybe an unnamed fear. Maybe a dream you once abandoned. And when they surface, don't judge or push them away. Listen as you would to an old friend you haven't seen in years. The most important part of integration is removing the labels good and bad. Society has taught us that anger is negative, sadness is weakness, fear is failure. But those judgments distort the human experience. In truth, no emotion is your enemy. Anger shows you where your boundaries were crossed. Sadness reveals that something important is gone. Fear reminds you of what needs protection. When judgment falls away, you can learn from what once frightened you. Then you'll start noticing the moments you want to escape. Maybe you bury yourself in work to avoid the past. Maybe you open social media to fill an emotional void. Maybe you pretend to be fine so you don't have to face the pain. Every one of those actions is an exit. And each time you notice, you have a chance to choose differently. Instead of running, give yourself 5 minutes to stay with the feeling. No analysis, no fixing, just presence. Over time, what once made you panic will start to feel bearable. But integration isn't just healing, it's reclaiming the gifts you lost. Think of the parts you once rejected. Creativity, boldness, compassion, leadership, your authentic voice. Bring them back into your life, little by little. If you were once mocked for singing, sing again. If you were silenced for speaking too much, stand up and speak. If you were told no one cares about your feelings, start listening to them with your whole heart. Each small act stitches back together the torn pieces of your soul. And then there's one final lesson. Embrace the duality of life. You can't have spring without winter. You can't know light without darkness. You can't love deeply without loss. Life isn't about erasing the dark. It's about learning to live fully in both. When you stop expecting life to always be easy, you no longer collapse when storms arrive. Finally, remember, integration is a lifelong journey. Some days you'll feel you've come so far, and some days old patterns will return as if they never left. Don't see that as failure. It's proof that you're still living, still learning, still evolving. Each time you return to the shadow, you step deeper into yourself. Each time you face it instead of running, you strengthen the foundation of your true freedom. And one day, you'll realize something miraculous. What once terrified you no longer holds power. The emotions that once ruled your life become companions. The parts once rejected become your greatest assets. And instead of standing fragmented, you stand whole. That is the power of integration. Not to make you better by the world's standards, but to bring you back to who you truly are. Whole, deep, free, and fully alive. And when that happens, you'll understand. You never had to find the light anywhere, because the light was always there, waiting for you to walk through the darkness so you could finally see it shine from within. And then, when you go deep enough into this journey, something quiet yet profound happens. You realize that the goal was never to fix yourself or become a better version. The goal was to come home, to return to who you've always been before the world told you who you should be, before fear taught you to shrink, before the past forced you to hide the most precious parts of your soul. When you learn to walk with your darkness, you stop fighting yourself. You no longer spend energy pushing emotions away, wasting time avoiding the truth, or torturing yourself over old mistakes. Every part of you, light and dark, wounded and strong, begins to merge like the final pieces of a puzzle. And for the first time, you can see the whole picture, a complete, complex, profound, and beautiful portrait. You. In that state, life is no longer a battle between good and bad. Pain is no longer a sign of failure, but a doorway to growth. Anger is no longer shameful, but a reminder that you deserve respect. Fear is no longer an enemy, but a friend guiding you beyond your old limits. Instead of trying to overcome yourself, you begin to collaborate with every part of who you are. And here's what so many people miss. When you stop dividing the world into light to keep and darkness to eliminate, you start living on a deeper level. where joy is no longer threatened by sorrow, where love is no longer eclipsed by fear, where life is no longer defined by success or failure. It's where you can cry in joy and smile through tears. It's where you feel every moment, not because it's good or bad, but because it's real. And in that space, the things you once searched for in the external world, love, validation, a sense of enough, begin to flow from within you. No longer love begged from others, but the love you give yourself. No longer validation from society, but the unconditional acceptance of your own heart. No longer enough achieved through accomplishments, but the deep knowing that you've always been enough simply by being who you are. Jung once said, "Until you make peace with your shadow, you will keep projecting it onto the world and calling it fate. But when you do make peace, when you learn to see the shadow not as an enemy but as a guide, you stop being a victim of destiny. You become the creator of your own life. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of all. You stop searching for the light in faraway places. You no longer need a perfect version of yourself to feel worthy. You no longer need a grand dream to feel meaningful. Because when light and darkness merge, you realize that everything you've ever searched for has always been inside you. Ask yourself one last time, are you ready to stop running and come home? Are you ready to look straight at the part you feared the most and discover that it holds not just darkness, but your brightest light? Are you ready to live a life no longer split in two, no longer performing, no longer proving, but whole, profound, and deeply real? If your answer is yes, then the journey has already begun. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know every step. All you have to do is stop, take a deep breath, and start listening. Because the truth is, you don't need to become anyone else. You only need to return to being yourself, whole, raw, and real. And when you do, darkness is no longer something to fear. It becomes the solid ground where light can shine its brightest. And if this journey has touched something deep within you, don't let it end at awareness. Turn it into action. Begin today. Just one small step. Face an emotion you usually avoid. Write down a memory you're afraid to remember, or simply place your hand on your heart and say, I accept every part of myself. If these words have made you reflect, share your thoughts below. Tell me which part of the darkness you're ready to face, and if someone in your life is also running from themselves, share this journey with them, because maybe, just maybe, it's the first spark that leads them home. Because in the end, no darkness is truly frightening. Once you learn to bring the light of awareness into it, and there's no journey more meaningful than the one where you return and embrace yourself, both the light and the dark, because only then do you truly live.